Welcome, everyone. HiFi Summit Day 3 continues with Tommy O. Tommy,
Look who we
we're
have
going to be
here.
talking about amplifiers. Take it away, man.
How are you, everybody?
Hey, we're doing good,
Great,
Tommy.
great.
Glad to have you here, man.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. So I have a little agenda that I wrote up. It's pretty simple, and I guess I'll go over the topics real quick. We're going to talk about signal paths and skipping over a preamp, also analog or digital volume, and then we'll have a Q&A session. That's it. So
cool deal.
First of all, I always get asked this question, who is Digital Amplifier Company? Who is Cherry Amplifier? Because there's two different names there. Cherry Amplifier is a brand, and Digital Amplifier Company is the company that owns that brand. So fortunately, the acronym for Digital Amplifier Company is DAC, which is, some people don't say it's fortunate, but it allows us to call one of our products, which is a DAC, the Dak Dak, which sounds almost like a duck quacking. We make amplifiers, we make D-to-A converters, we also make some accessories such as the Cherry USB, and we make a few wires, not to make money on wires, we're just providing them so that we can assure low resistance or short signal paths on people's systems. So let me get started with about signal path lengths. And one of our concerns, I guess our design philosophy is really to minimize the distance between places where the audio goes through on a circuit board or through a cable. So we want to keep components on the boards lined up in a certain fashion so that the distance that the signals travel is minimized, which minimizes noise, it minimizes interference with other circuits, and it also makes power concerns less important because you can drop less current across less distance or drop less voltage across less distance if it's for power traces. And we do a lot of very high power stuff. So the fatness of traces on boards, the thickness of the copper on the board, and the distance of the trace on the board matters. All that stuff matters. And when it comes to signals, like small signals, let's say the signal of the digital output of a preamp or digital output of a processor that goes into a D-to-A converter, that signal comes into the board and has a very short path to the chip that uses it for the similar reasons. And you'd think, well, geez, it goes through this long cable, so isn't the cable part of that trace also? And yes, it is, but we still want to make everything as short and as direct as possible when it comes to audio signals. Making things closer is one way to do that. Using shorter interconnects is another way to do that. And shorter speaker cables is yet another way to do that. So as far as wire goes, cables, it's a really touchy subject for audiophiles. Cables are just a transport mechanism to get a signal from one place to another. And in some cases, that signal has a lot of current associated with it. That would be in the case where a power amplifier is driving a speaker. And in the cases where large current is involved, such as power cords or speaker cables, we always tell people if you could keep the wire shorter, keep the cable shorter, and make it fatter, then that would be a way to reduce the resistance, which is, and I'll say this, in fear of backlash, but resistance is all that matters when it comes to power cords and speaker cables. There's no need for shielding. The impedances are too low for shielding to make a difference. There's no need for a battery-powered shield thingy, which is total snake oil. And by the way, I'm very, very anti-snake oil. I don't know if you guys know that, but my customers know that, and so the people that read the things I write on Facebook and other places. But getting back to speaker wire, getting back to cable, there's no need for special materials such as silver or different type of alloys. Really, what matters is resistance. It doesn't matter if it's going through copper or silver or whatever. Silver is slightly lower resistance than copper. However, it's by a very small percentage. So if you make your speaker wire 1 inch shorter, it'll have the same effect of using a metal that is 100 times the price. So regarding the signal path inside of devices, the same rules apply. So we're talking about the shorter the distance, the better, the fatter the traces, the better, the thicker the copper, the better, in where it matters, where it's practical. So we also, one of the products we make is an amplifier called the Inline Maraschino. I don't know if Joe can bring up a photo of that or maybe from the website. The Inline Maraschino is able to be hung from the speaker. And the reason for that is to make the speaker, I don't see it.
What is it called again? Maybe Chana could bring it up.
I got it.
The Inline Maraschino. If you go in Maraschino on the website under products, then look for Inline Maraschino.
There we go.
Let's see.
Did it share the wrong screen?
Yeah, it's sharing the screen with the seminar on it. You're going to get caught in an infinite loop.
Oh, no. Where did it?
There it is.
There it is.
That's it. So as you can see, these amps, they're small. I don't know if there's a photo on there. Maybe if you scroll down, there might be a photo that shows the amplifier connected to a speaker. Oh, and there isn't. All right. I have a nice photo of this, but I'll just describe it. The amplifier binding posts can be connected to wires that are, say, 4 inches long, and the amplifier only weighs about a pound. That's because the power supply is external, so it won't fall off of even spring contacts. So because it's so light, and this pretty much eliminates the speaker wire, which is another going along the lines of a shorter signal path. But if you look at wire, the way wire resistance works is it's cross-sectional area multiplied, the resistance of the cross-sectional area multiplied by the length. So there are two things you can do to make speaker wire less resistance. One of them is lower gauge, which is fatter wire, and the other one is just a shorter wire. So the Inline Maraschino lets you have speaker wires that are effectively 4 inches long. And that preserves the damping factor of the amplifier, which is the resistance of the load over the resistance of the output impedance of the amplifier, or over the output impedance of the amplifier. In the case of the Inline Maraschino, the damping factor is about 500, which means that the output impedance that's measured into 8 ohms, that means the output impedance is 16 milliohms. That's 16 thousandths of an ohm. Very, very low. If you take a 9-gauge speaker cable that is 8 feet long, which is one that we make, resistance of that cable round trip is actually about the same as the amplifier itself. So that's another 16 milliohms. And now the effective damping factor of the amplifier is 250 instead of 500, because it goes through 16 milliohms to get to the speaker. There's a big debate on how important damping factor is. However, I believe that the higher the better. So the shorter the speaker cable, the better. And customers of ours have always told us that makes a big difference. That's one of the few things that is very inexpensive to do to improve your system, is to just use shorter or fatter speaker wire. So regarding the Dak Dak, can you bring up the Dak Dak on there? It's under products. Yeah, there's a delay from YouTube. What I see. Yes. So this is a very plain vanilla DAC. It takes in PCM over coax digital, and it outputs analog audio.
Kind of looks cherry to me.
Yeah. So we have one version with volume control.
What did you mean? What do you mean by vanilla? Like it doesn't add anything to it? Is that what you mean?
Plain vanilla by that standard means
no
simple.
frills. No frills, man. We're just talking performance.
No frills. So I mean, the highest performance version of that is the Dak Dak 2 HS or HSV, and that can reach 130 dB signal to noise. So it's a very quiet DAC. It's very accurate, 0.0004% distortion. You can see what's inside of it there. Very basic. It's a couple of PCM 1794A DAC chips, one for each channel. And then we have an output stage that drives the outputs. So inside of that product, there's a what's called an SPDIF receiver, which receives the digital audio, and then that drives the DAC chips. All of the path lengths for that all of the path lengths are kept short and are optimized by the placement of the components, but especially this is important on the output side. On the output side, there's only 1 inch of PC board between the DAC chip and the output connector. And the reason we do this is to make it so that there's no possibility of any noise leaking in from something else on the circuit or even outside the circuit that would create a performance issue. So and then going along with short signal paths, one of the things that we always preach about, I guess, is we tell our customers, if you can skip the preamp, then do it, because in today's systems, a lot of them are driven by streamers. So a streamer picks up the data off of the internet and drives the DAC with that data. And in our case, we make our DACs so that they're able to drive our amplifiers at least a few dB into clipping, but not much more, so that we maximize the dynamic range. And we also allow the amplifier to be driven directly from the DAC without any issues as far as the signal level or the configuration. So the output of this DAC is what we call double differential, which means that there are two levels of circuitry in there. The first level of circuitry is a differential circuit, which drives a second differential circuit. So there are 4 outputs on this DAC, essentially, plus and minus for left and right. So what I was saying before about being very basic is for a reason. We don't do that just because that way it's easier for us to get a product out. Actually, it's more difficult because we need to optimize everything just right. There's a lot less to go wrong. There's no processor inside of this DAC that would create noise that the other circuits would pick up. And also, like I mentioned, it's made to drive cherry amps. So if you can skip the preamp in a system, this seminar is where this talk is about high performance systems. So there are certain things that kill performance. One of them is noise. That noise is the ultimate enemy in audio. The second one is distortion. The third one is more side issues like not enough power or the wrong kind of interfacing or bad cables, stuff like that. But the really important things are noise and distortion. So we want to minimize those as much as possible. And in order to do that, we tell people try to skip the preamp if you can, because typically you have a streamer driving an audio system. So the streamer, in many cases, is able to perform a preamp type function. And that function is controlling the volume and selecting a source. So one system that we have put together here is based on a Node 2i, which is from Blue Sound, which is an NAD product. And I believe they're one of your silver sponsors or gold sponsors of the show.
I actually have one. It's really, really nice. I use it a lot.
I'm telling you, it changed my outlook on how hard it is to find a song. For one, it's really simple to use, and if you combine that with a lossless streaming service such as Qobuz, then you get performance that is just as good as playing from playing a CD to playing a high-res 192/24 recording, say, for example. And preamps can only add noise or add distortion. They can't take it away Once it's there, it's there. So I think if you're concerned only about performance and not about convenience or cost, then you might say, well, I'd have to have a very, very good preamp in order not to create any additional noise or any additional distortion that is significant enough to be audible. And the debate will never end on what is audible as far as distortion, although I know there have been some tests that prove that people can hear below 0.1% distortion, which is pretty amazing, actually. Why you want distortion that's so much lower than what you can hear is because it's cumulative. So every step along the signal chain, you're adding noise and you're adding distortion. So in the case of a very, very simple system, which I'll tell you about in a second, each step is made to produce as little or add as little noise and distortion as possible, and you want to minimize the number of steps. So instead of having a CD player, then a DAC, then a preamp, then an amplifier that might even have a selector of its own or a volume control, and then speakers. The other side of this is, say you have a receiver that drives speakers. Well, I think we all know that receivers have their shortcomings as far as performance and power output, things like that. So in a lot of cases, we sell amplifiers to people that take a receiver and use the external amplifiers to boost the performance of their system. So getting back to the system I was going to tell you about, using a Node 2i, driving a Dak Dak 2 HS without a volume control. We have that driving a pair of maraschino monos, which go to 100, which go to 1,000 watts a channel. So plenty of power. 120 dB signal noise ratio on the amp, the 120 dB SNR. The DAC has 130 dB SNR. We connect them with XLR cables, and I forgot to mention about balanced connections. So I'll get back to that, but balanced always preferred over. There's really no need to debate that. It's just a way to have a lower noise interconnect. And if you have a short XLR cable, say a foot long, it's very, very unlikely that anything outside of that is going to cause enough interference to get through the shield, get into the cable, and also screw up the common mode rejection ratio, the input stage of the amplifier, which is what you're going to have to do to create a problem with a balanced connection. With a single-ended connection, you're going to have problems with ground loops and with grounding. Our amplifiers especially our maraschino amplifiers, have solved noise and hum problems in systems a lot. And the reason is because many systems have ground loops in them. People don't realize that these ground loops exist. So when they put an amplifier in that has a floating ground, which means that the power supply is completely isolated electrically from the wall. So the power that goes into the amplifier has an isolation barrier between the AC mains, which is what you plug into. And the reason for that is because the ground of the amplifier can then be made to lock to the preamp's ground or whatever's driving it, the DAC or preamp, so that there's no possibility for the ground of the amplifier to loop through the source and then back into the wall on the other side. And that's where ground loops happen almost all the time. So let's say you have a 3-prong plug, plugs in your preamp. So earth ground connects to your preamp. And then you have an amplifier with a 3-prong plug, and an earth ground connects to your amplifier. And the chassis have earth ground as a safety measure. That's so that ground fault interrupters work. Otherwise, they can't, because if there's no ground. So if you have an interconnect between the preamplifier and the amplifier in this system with 2 3-prong plugs, the one And that's if the ground is connected to the chassis and to the signal ground. And then you connect it with a single-ended interconnect. That the ground part of the interconnect actually is connecting the earth ground of the amplifier to the earth ground of the preamp. And if either of those two have the signal ground connected to earth ground, which is very common, then you're going to get hum, probably, or noise. Is everybody still hearing me?
Yeah, we're good, man.
Okay.
There's a handful of questions. I don't know if you're able to see on the right side of your screen. There's a link that says chats. So there's a private chat, and then there's comments. So there's a couple of them that have been coming in. Let me scroll back up here. So feel free if you see any of those that you want to address as you're talking.
Okay.
Jump right in there. I know one asked. I'm looking up here.
I'm going through my list here. Yeah, I have a timer going off in the background. I'm trying to fix that too.
That's okay.
I have something in the crock pot, guys.
Oh, hey, man.
1,000 watts.
Tommy's cooking today.
I'm cooking all the time.
Seems like everybody's enjoying all the
that's a huge
technical
troll.
aspects of this.
So I'm looking at this. My debit card is about to get whacked. Sorry about that.
Here we go. Here was a question from earlier. I was trying to find it. So where's the input for the power source? Is that the one which looks like an XLR input?
The power source is a DIN plug. That's the one in that photo there, the stereo maraschino. When you see the back of it, it's the one to the left. And the one to the left there too. So when you stack them up, I think there might be a picture. It's kind
of like a little short braided pair. Or braided.
Yeah,
cord.
it's Michael's seen it in person.
Yeah, I got a review on it.
So you know when you stack them on top of each other, there's a very short version of what we call a DC snake, which is a super low impedance connector to go between the power supply and the amp. The reason we do any of that is so that you can change the power supply. It all started with the inline maraschino, actually, as far as the maraschino series, which we did before we did the desktop. We did the one that hangs. And we had a hard time with acceptance. People saw an amplifier hang from the speaker, and they said, what is that? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't, doesn't look like what I'm used to. I can understand that it's an amp, but I mean, why would you do that? So we made a desktop version, the desktop maraschino, and those look like little cubes. Really high wife acceptance factor, by the way, guys, in case you're wondering. I've had so many compliments where people say, oh, my wife thinks these are so cute, or they think that she thinks these really look a lot nicer than that big bulky stuff that you had. But the desktop maraschino looks like the inline maraschino. Actually, can you pull that up? It looks like the inline maraschino, but on a base. So you could just go back and then click on desktop. There you go. So the desktop one, they're different kinds.
Oh, yeah.
These guys are 400 watt per channel amps, and they're almost 120 dB. They're 118 dB, super low output impedance, just like the inline maraschino, just like the 2-cherry, actually 3-cherry, 4-cherry, 5-cherry. That's another series we have, multiple multi-channel amps. These amplifiers are very similar to the inline maraschino. It uses the same board inside, and it also allows you to get close to the speaker because it's pretty small, pretty light. They weigh about 8 pounds with the base. And how did we get here? Why we're talking about that now? I can't remember. The cable. So originally we had a 3-foot-long DC snake cable to connect the power supply to the hanging amplifier for, say, a bookshelf speaker that is on a stand, right? So there's a distance between the floor and the speaker terminals. So if you have an amplifier that's right up at the speaker, then you need a long cable to get to the power supply. So we made a shorter version, which has even less resistance. We're talking about the difference between 10 milliohms, 90 milliohms kind of difference. That does matter when you're talking about the currents that these power supplies put out. That power supply on the bottom of the stack, that stack of components, that's a 60 volt 1 kilowatt power supply, and it only weighs about 3 pounds. And that drives the stereo maraschino, the inline maraschino, the desktop maraschino, and the same type of supply is used to drive the 2 cherry, 3 cherry, 4 cherry, and 5 cherry, all with the same type of supply. Alternately, there's a 48 volt power supply, which looks kind of like the power supply you have for a laptop, and that power supply puts out less power. All the specs are on the website as far as that goes. I'm checking out these comments here. Thank you for the "they are so adorable" comment. The power supplies, how big are the power supplies? They're about 6.5 by 6.5 by 2.5 inches.
Yeah. So one thing that I was really surprised about when I received the product is how small it was, how light it was. And I'll be honest with you guys, when I first got it, I was skeptical because I'm thinking, how in the world is this little dinky amplifier going to power my 2 tower speakers? No problem. I mean, absolutely no problem. Tons of power. Super, super clean. Very, very impressive for sure. But these are really, really small, so they won't take up a lot of space. And like you can see in the picture here, you can stack them. So it just kind of keeps them nice and organized.
Yes, the stackability, that's a stereo maraschino thing. That's the second box up from the bottom with the volume knob on it. I saw Nick 10's question. He said, what is, yeah, there it is, the advantages of Cherry multi-channel over a Class AB with large toroidal. I would say several. One of them is short signal pass. Another one is DC coupling. All of our amps, except for the old ones, have DC coupling. Also, frequency response up to 150 or 100 kilohertz on the Maraschino series, 150 kilohertz on the Megashino series. We didn't even talk about the Megashino yet. Also, signal noise ratio is super high. Distortion is super low. The damping factor is super high because the output impedance is super low. I use super a lot, don't I? This is pretty super.
I'm seeing that super toroidal transformer in there. Golly.
I'll tell you about Cherry. Okay. First of all, I have an ex-wife who hated the word cherry. She thought it was the stupidest thing ever. I said, well, the name Apple's already taken. And I kind of want to be someday.
I'm just joking to laugh about that. She hated it, so you decided to do it. Is that how it works?
Cherry amplifier to be like the Apple of audio.
Okay.
Awesome.
What's that?
That's kind of funny.
No, the fact you said you started with that she hated it. And so
yeah.
Obviously you didn't mind using it still.
Yeah. No, almost all of the good decisions I've made in my life have been going against advice.
Interesting.
Against strong advice.
Yeah.
People saying, "What are you, crazy?" That doesn't, like the hanging amplifier was like that. I was told that it's a bad idea. It's just, no one's going to accept it. And at first that was kind of true, but the more and more people that tried it said, wow, this really is something, this amplifier, because it's capable of 1,000 watts into 1.8 ohms. That little 1 pound amplifier. And I talk about numbers art, and I just wanted to be known that specifications are great and everything, but I've heard some amplifiers and I've heard some DACs that have great measurements that do not sound as good as they should for their measurements, and I know why now. I didn't know why decades ago, and I slowly, over time, did experiments where I changed circuits and I listened to what it sounded like and I measured it, And I did this stuff in iteratively, recursively, whatever you want to put it, over decades. And that's the only way that I could figure it out. It's very touchy. Some things are it's just like splitting hairs. The difference between, say, having a certain amount of feedback and a little less, or changing the circuit top altogether is like starting from scratch. So if you just change little incremental things, there's only so much you can do. So we've actually changed topologies even. Our classic Cherry, for example, is a single-ended design. It has bipolar power supplies, so there's a full bridge in there, full bridge rectifier that creates plus or minus 90-something volts. It's more like 95 sometimes, and for 120 volts AC nominal. And that same transformer is used to generate single rails in our maraschino series, the same kind of transformer. But the maraschino is a single rail bridged output amplifier. So I don't know if I answered that question about Class A, B amplifiers. One thing that is also apparent here is that the size and weight of these products is much smaller than expect for something that would be that power. And that's just due to power efficiency, which is a no-brainer with Class D amplifiers. And about Class D, really briefly, because I can see we're already half an hour in, Class D can be done in about 100 different ways. When people say, oh, yeah, I don't like Class D amplifiers, they sound like blah, blah, blah. Well, if you haven't heard every Class D amplifier that exists, you don't know what another type of amplifier might sound like that's Class D. Class D is a broad category. It's not a specific design like Class A, B, or Class A. And by the way, Class A amplifiers have always had a special place in my heart because they are super clean. And they are super low in a lot of cases, and they have real high bandwidth. They just do so many things right, but they weigh 200 pounds a channel, and they're more than a foot on a side. It just becomes impractical. And in another sense, it becomes impractical when they can be used as a space heater for it's fires that don't run so hot. But that leads me to my next. So let me look at the question. Was analog versus digital volume control? I don't know if anybody is interested in talking about that. Let me see if we can. Okay, so Bill from Audio Talk says no. I don't know what that no is about.
Yeah, so real quick, I just
want to... Do they get really hot?
Yeah, that was about the heat, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say here, let me see if I can pull this up. So you do have some products that you're highlighting here at the HiFi Summit. Let me see if I can bring this up here. So this one, for example, right? Stereo Maraschino. Mm-hmm. And, you're doing a giveaway over here, and also show specials. So just email them, support@digitalamp.com. So exclusive.
I'm curious how many entries there are.
Yeah, just limited time offer.
It actually shows how many entries are on there. If you end up going up to the giveaway.
Oh, yeah. So on your giveaways, you want to know right now? Okay.
He's curious.
All right, you're curious. We can do it right now if you want.
So Tommy's giving away. There's 3.
No.
I could tell you right now.
I figured it was.
Yeah, I don't mind. Okay. But yeah, so you have this going on, and you have a few giveaways. Check this out. Cherry USB to SPDIF SPDIF connector. Yeah. You have your 2 Cherry amp. This one is huge.
I'm saying,
everybody wants this one.
Yep.
Everybody wants that. And your Dak Dak.
Shoot, I might want that.
Look at this thing right here.
I'm gonna quit right now,
I'll tell you
Joe,
about the Cherry
so
USB
I can sign up for the giveaway.
You're gonna quit right now so you can sign up. Nice.
Yeah.
He's heading over.
No. So the Cherry USB is another example of proper signaling, proper short signal pass, proper use of signaling, proper isolation, and the reason is because there are two things that. So it runs off of USB power. You don't have to plug it in to the wall. The second thing is the output is isolated. It's electrically isolated. So connect this to it. It's not going to cause a ground loop between your computer and the audio system. So it effectively isolates the computer from the audio system for low noise and easy operation. And we give away a gold-plated USB cable with it. We do make some fancy SPDIF cables if you're interested.
Yeah, your connection's cutting out a little bit, Tommy.
And
I think somebody over there is probably gaming on your end. They're probably taking up all your bandwidth over there. Somebody, but it's all good. So here's the 2-cherry, right?
Look at that
on our page.
400 watts.
Give you a little more information. Also doing oh my goodness, look at this giveaway on that one, and you do have a show special on this one also. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because somebody's like, add it to cart. What is the coupon code that I should use?
Mm-hmm. All the information is on the product.
What do you
page.
say to that, Tommy?
Yeah,
I'll put you on the spot right now.
Yeah.
Tommy's ready.
I have
ready.
My email address, support@digilamp.com.
Email him.
You just email me and I'll explain. It's what I like to do is make sure that the customer knows exactly what they're getting as far as all the options, and that they know what they can pick and what they can't pick. Based on that price is for a standard 2-cherry, which doesn't. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah, you're good.
Can you hear me? Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
The 2-cherry that is on the special is the standard version, which doesn't have the faceplate and the fancy WBT gold binding posts.
Mm-hmm.
The King version is another. Sorry.
I was going to say, Chana, if you can click on the red one there, there's 2 images. I think that's your King version. Is that correct?
I got this one here.
Okay, there you go.
Yes, that's the King version. So,
and then there's
that has the faceplate and fancy WBTs. You can see the binding post in that picture. It's not coming up.
There you go.
Oh, there it is.
Oh yeah.
So those are the fancy binding posts. The non-fancy binding posts actually look almost as good. They're pretty good. They're gold plated, and they're red and black, not red and white. But these just look like jewelry.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes question the value of it because in most of our amplifiers, if you get the less expensive binding posts, they're with fast-on connectors, but the fancy WBTs are soldered. However, in the X-Cherry series, which is the 2-cherry, 3-cherry, 4-cherry, 5-cherry, the binding posts are soldered, whether they're the less expensive ones or the more expensive ones. So the difference there is minimal. In fact, it's only about 2 milliohms. 2-cherry, they say, well, I don't want to get the King version because I really don't want the fancy bindings, but I like the face. So what we're doing is during this show and during the special, you can add a faceplate at lower cost than our normal price.
All right.
And it makes the amp look a lot nicer, but it takes 17 inches across instead of 14.
And that's just a standard equipment width anyway, right?
So let's look here. What do you mean?
So I have a quick question too. Let me see if I can bring this.
Did you hear me?
Chrome tab.
I don't know if I'm breaking up or.
It's breaking up a little bit.
Breaking up a little bit, but so I have a question about the stereo maraschino, and right here. So this thing is tiny, right?
Mm-hmm. Super
this
small.
Thing is small, and I'm looking at the specs here, and so this is crazy to me. Output power, and it shows different for the King version. If you're using 60 volts, 400 watts per channel into 4 ohms.
Ooh.
48 volt, 125 into 4 ohms. So obviously there are different power supplies. How big is this one for the 60-volt one? How big would that be?
It's about 8 inches by 1.5 inches by 3, something like that.
And how much does that weigh?
It's like maybe 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds, 3 pounds.
So it's not much. It's not like it's going to
work.
I'm telling you, dude, I was extremely skeptical. I was.
One thing I'd like to bring up, with the mono blocks, the 48-volt power supply can put out 250 watts into 4 ohms per channel. So there's really not a huge difference in power output between the 48-volt and the 60-volt if they're mono blocks. With the stereo maraschino, both channels are sharing the same power supply.
Gotcha.
So you can't get as much out of it.
Gotcha.
Right? So, but the 60-volt power supply is a kilowatt power supply. And it can drive both channels to capacity.
Makes sense.
And it can sustain about how much, like continuous?
What do you mean? Contain
like 400 watts
with the 48-volt one?
With the 60 volts is 400 watts per channel. I can't.
Yeah, those are continuous. Those are continuous power ratings.
Joe, I'm telling you, dude. You'll be blown away. Yeah.
I mean, 400 in a 4
that's
ohm.
not peak. The only time we use peak is with the maraschino, because the maraschino has tremendous capacitors in it, and it can carry through a 2 kilowatt peak into 2 ohms. The maraschino. I don't know if you want to show that there, but I want it's important also to note that the same board that's used in the maraschino desktop and the inline version is also used in the X Cherry, which is the 2 cherry, 3 cherry, but it's not the same board that's in the stereo maraschino. The stereo maraschino has a different board, which has 2 channels on it. So it's not, the stereo maraschino is not as high performance as the mono blocks. The mono blocks are
with these. Probably.
What was that?
Am I going to blow up my speakers?
Oh, well, you've got to just be careful.
Keep that volume low, Joe.
Start off low, work your way up.
I would imagine that my speakers are going to distort way before this amp does. So
yeah, that amp is DC coupled, 120 dB, 0.001% distortion from about like a watt to maybe 100 watts. So for the meat of the power space, it's very, very low distortion, balanced all the way through input and output. And the output impedance of that amplifier is about 36 milliohms instead of 16. The reason being because it runs off of 93 volts instead of 60. And each channel has 12 output transistors, which is very unusual for a Class D amplifier. And each of those transistors actually has a current rating of more than 100 amps. So it's possible to put out for a very, very brief amount of time, a super huge current. We say it could do 50 amps, but it could really do more for peaks. And the only reason you'd ever need that in audio is when you're trying to jerk the speaker back from being, say, sticking out all the way, and the reactance of the speaker is kind of, the momentum of the speaker still wants it to be where it was, and it's very inductive in the bass, especially. So to pull it back, you need to have a huge amount of current. And so these things have what we call stump pulling bass. They really drive, and I use an example of the JTR speakers a lot because JTR makes some really, really strong speakers with very low extension, namely the 210s, which they go down to 25 hertz in the normal room. And those are, they're 125 pounds, and they can handle thousands of watts. So no worries with the maraschino, overpowering. It's not going to. So someone asked, do you have a multi-channel amp?
Yep,
there
we're
is
looking at right there.
Multi-channel amp series.
So if you scroll down a little bit, there's like several of them. There's a 2-channel, 3-channel, 4-channel, and a 5-channel.
I know people are always asking, where can I get a 3-channel amp? Hello,
there you
Jerry.
go.
No.
There it is.
Yeah,
Power
and
that front
actually,
stage.
something to mention here with the multi-channel amps, we could fit double rail capacitance, which means that the normal maraschino has a single capacitor for the rail, a single bulk capacitor, and then we can fit two of them in the 4-channel and the 5-channel series in the series, and we can fit three of them, so we can fit triple capacitance in the 2-cherry and the 3-cherry. So when you get a 2-cherry, you're getting almost the same hardware that you get with a pair of golden cherry maraschinos, and those are $6,900 a pair.
Man.
So the kind of hardware you're getting for the money is extremely high, and that's because our margins are low, and we don't gouge, and we're trying to get our name out there still. We definitely want to get to the level of some of the more well-known brands at some point soon.
Our buddy in here in the chat, Life of Bliss, he has he has 3 24-inch subs. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
He needs to power those.
Wow.
I'm sure he needs help powering those. I think you have some products that might fit the bill.
There's a customer that has 2 custom-made subwoofers, 4 woofers each, and they're 8-ohm woofers in parallel. So there are 8 woofers total. He's using inline maraschino amps to drive them, and he said that they are not bottoming out. Like, they can still, even into 2 ohms, even into 4 12-inch woofers per channel.
Tommy, I challenge you to blow up one of Life of Bliss's 24-inch subs. That's the challenge.
You got to get that thing over here. I want to try it.
He needs views.
I love
if you could blow up one of his subs, then that would be awesome.
It'd blow up his
Is
channel.
that cool, Life of Bliss? You down with that? He has a YouTube channel also.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So
where are these made? Are these assembled here or
Allentown, PA?
Oh wow,
Pennsylvania. Nice.
There we go.
Yeah, we buy all local parts. All of our wire harnesses, enclosures, faceplates, our board assembly is done locally. Like all of the, did I mention wires? Yeah. So wires, enclosures, boards, and hardware, all of the little like jelly bean parts and all that, that's all bought from local sources.
That's great to hear. Everything's American made. That's awesome.
Yeah.
My Life of Bliss is bring it on. That'll get you some views.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Blowing up my 24-inch subs.
We did a show last year where we had a 25,000 watt home theater using JTR speakers and Cherry amps.
Yeah.
And the management of the show approached us and warned us that we could possibly disturb the structural integrity of the hotel.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
That's not a joke.
Yeah,
we need to start making videos like this.
Were you using the 212 RTs from JTR?
There were 212 RTs and the Captivator 4400. I'm not sure which one. It's 18
4,000
inches.
ULF.
Whichever one's 18 inches. I believe they're ported.
Yep, that's the 4,000 ULF dual 18s.
Single 18. These were single.
Okay, gotcha.
And we had 8 of them.
Yeah, crazy setup.
We started talking about blowing up Life of Bliss's subs, and the view count just went up all of a sudden. See,
he just got a few more subscribers on his channel.
Is there a view count somewhere?
On our end, we can see a view count.
40,000 people. What?
That's right.
So let's see. Any other questions? Let's have Tommy address some of your questions. I know you have some.
So here's Scott Newby. Scott has man, I wish I could put Tommy up higher than us. There we go. It was kind of hiding you down there, Tommy. So Scott Newby has an incredible, crazy setup, and so he's very familiar with Tommy. He's very familiar with JTR. Said he heard the Cherry JTR combo. Said it's incredible. So Cherry will be his next amp.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, someone asked a question about the DAC. You know what? I'll mention it. I'll just cover it in case. So the DAC that we make, we have a volume-controlled version of that DAC, and there are only a few reasons why you'd need a volume control. in most of these cases with the simple system, like I was saying before, which I actually didn't finish about the details with that, but for a simple system, usually you're driving it with something that is volume controlled already. So let's say you have a node or a squeeze box or some kind of streamer. That streamer is driving the DAC, but that streamer has a volume control, and it's a digital volume control. So that streamer does not need any. It doesn't need any volume control on external sources that have a volume control. And I'm kind of getting convoluted here, but so I'll say it this way. A lot of streamers have an external input or external inputs, so you can use them as a preamp and also a streamer. In my case of this one reference system, I actually have a record player. Yes, I play records. I'm waiting for the noise to come back from that.
No, a lot of these guys play records, man. Some of these dudes are into vinyl.
Digital amplifier guy, yeah. So I play records into a Project Phono preamp, and then the Project Phono preamp drives the node analogly, and then I can control the volume of the LP playback from my cell phone or from a tablet. See what I mean? So there's no need for volume control there either. Where there is a need for volume control is something where, say, you have a CD transport that doesn't have a volume control, and you want to drive that directly into the DAC, and then drive the speakers or drive the amplifiers with the DAC output. So there's no preamp there, but then there's only one source. So with the node, I can select multiple sources. I can select Bluetooth, yeah, I know, and I can also select an analog input, like the phono input, and I can also select the streaming input, which can be from multiple sources, like Qobuz, Tidal, Deezer, different sources like that. So the reason for the digital volume control of the Dak Dak HSV, that volume control it's an analog pot, which means it feels just like a volume control on anything else. It has stops on the bottom, stops on the top. That volume control is measured by a processor, a very small processor with a very slow clock, so that the circuit knows where the position of the knob is. And that's the only thing analog about it. After that, it uses a digital attenuator to attenuate the audio. So the signal path, the analog signal path of the DAC is not affected by adding volume control at all. It's the same DAC. The only thing that's different is the data that the DAC chips are being fed, which is now scaled or attenuated by the digital volume control. And that's controlled by an analog pot. So it feels like an analog volume control, and it sounds like the way you move it, it sounds just like it's an analog volume, but it's not. It's actually a digital attenuation. So for those of you who want the simplest, easiest way to make a super high performance system, I always recommend, and this is coming full circle, a streamer that has preamp type features, driving a DAC, because most streamers have pretty crappy DACs, I have to say. And also they hardly ever have balanced output DACs or DC coupled DACs. And that DAC drives the amps, and the amps drive the speakers, and that's the system. So, another thing about the crappy DACs and the DC coupling, there are not many DACs that have DC coupling. It's really difficult to do DC coupling on amplifiers because the DC offset of the amplifier is hard to control. It's like you have a giant battleship and you have to get it with 1 inch, position. So it's really difficult in an amplifier, but it's offset on a DAC. It's going to be multiplied by the output gain of the amplifier.
Tommy,
I don't think I'm smart enough to understand this.
So a 1 volt, say, create, if the gain is 30 millivolts on the speakers, not much. It's too technical?
No, it's just
Okay,
I'm
and
not
DC
technical
coupling
enough. It's
system,
not
aside
you.
from a DC couple like the Cherry.
There you go. Hey, Tommy, here's a question from Jim.
No one, there are people. Okay. The impedance of Cherry amps ranges from 20K typically to 40K.
Cool.
Yeah.
And
I wish I could understand all this.
usually it's stated in the specs on the website. And if it's not, I'll just tell you, DC coupling is really important. We're always talking about it because I'm a techno guy. Every time you have AC coupling, it adds phase shift, and it's cumulative. So if you have a CD player with AC coupling, which is typical, it drives a preamp with AC coupling on the inputs, and then AC coupling in the middle of the volume or the volume controls, and then AC coupling on the output, and then you drive an AC couple amp. You have 5 AC couplings in series. Each one causes a little more phase shift, which in the end winds up being delay in the bass with respect to the rest of the audio spectrum. So when that big thump comes up from the bass drum, that thump needs to be exactly when the cymbal gets hit. And you can actually notice in some systems that it sounds weird. It sounds like the cymbal leads the bass drum a little bit. So if you want to know how to eliminate that, the answer is DC coupling. And to do DC coupling is going to make the speaker pop out of the box. If it's a woofer, if it's a cone.
There it is.
So
there it is.
Great
Tommy,
stuff, man.
Tommy's
sounds like
dropping
someone
their
asked-
wallets.
Tommy's dropping some deep knowledge here, man.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Someone asked me about the sound signature of the Cherry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Thank you.
important question. Good question. Yes, neutral. Absolutely neutral. What is really important, though, is that the way that it handles the high frequencies is done differently than other amplifiers in order for it to not sound grating or harsh.
Mm-hmm.
It's the simplest way to put it. Those are engineering terms.
Yeah, because I saw on your website, and when I talked to you last time, you said, yeah, you care a lot about the measurements and the specs, but at the end of the day, you listen to them.
Yeah.
It has to sound good to you, right? That's the one
Yes,
thing that you wanted to point out to me.
It's really difficult to figure out what circuit changes cause what audible differences.
Yeah.
And as far as the sound of Cherry amps, the idea is to be as neutral as possible, but not to lose the sweetness of the sound, which means not to become too analytical.
Gotcha.
Or to make it sound too dry or lifeless. People say all the time, the Cherry amps sound very musical. And I say, well, that's not a technical term, but I know what you're saying.
All right.
Got a couple quick questions before we wrap up here. How important is the dampening factor?
Opinions vary, and I say opinions on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I think damping factor is very important. Damping factor works with decay time and attack time. I don't know if you've ever seen waterfall plots. The better that the speaker is controlled, the better it sounds, in my opinion. And higher damping factor means better control. However, some speakers actually don't like to have really high damping factor drive them. It's very unusual, but I've seen it happen. It's not like it's not a rule of thumb that can always go by. But in general, damping factor is usually measured at 100 hertz. And we measure damping factor at 100 hertz, 1 kilohertz, and 10 kilohertz. And the reason is because it gets more and more difficult to have high damping factor as the frequency goes up. Some of these amplifiers that say they have 1,000 damping factor, you measure them at 10 kilohertz, and it's actually more like 20.
Gotcha.
So it makes a big difference. And that's one reason we always talk about fat speaker wires, because the speaker wires can kill your damping factor. If you're using 20 gauge lamp cord, stop. Get some fat wire.
Yeah. Hey, Tommy, before you go, is there anything else that you want to plug? Anything else you want these people to do? Check out? Special?
I just want to say we love our customers, and that's not just a saying for us. It's actually real. I have relationships with a lot of my customers. We're friends. and I know who's putting the food on our tables. I haven't lost touch with the fact that if it wasn't for them, I would be poor. First of all, no, I would be very sad, and I feel like I can contribute more to other people's lives if I am able to make them happy on more than just a technical level. So I really appreciate the patience my customers have had with me. I really appreciate the support that they've given me over the years. And Cherry Amplifier would be nothing if we didn't get so lucky with our customers.
Well, you got to be able to do some things right to be able to keep those customers. I mean, I don't think you get lucky with your customers. You know what I'm saying?
Well, we did some things that were kind of the right move without even trying.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some fortunate circumstance involved. I know what you're saying, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I treat people with respect. I feel like that's almost a thing going by in some cases. And if you ever call FedEx customer support, you can figure out exactly what customer support should not be. And same goes for so many big name companies.
I was just talking about FedEx in the video chat, the video group chat, like screwing me over left and right. Anyway.
Yeah. So Tommy, after
you're not
this,
going to get a call center in India when you call me.
No.
we're gonna go ahead and close this up. But why don't you stick around, and if you can, hop into the lobby in the group video chat. I'm sure these people would love to talk to you, if you can.
Okay.
Yeah. So stick around.
I'm gonna put
Thank you very much, everybody.
I'm gonna put a link to your two-channel Cherry special. People were asking about that; they couldn't find it. Someone drop it over in the chat right now.
One more thing I want to say.
Sure.
The two cherry is really good at driving Magnapan speakers, and I found that out recently. Torture testing, I was pretty blown away. So, if you have Magnapan speakers, maraschinos or two cherries are great for that.
Notorious for needing power, huh?
Absolutely, they are really power hungry, especially in the high frequencies.
Very cool. Shauna, why don't you take us out?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps it up for our seminars, HiFi Summit Day 3. Don't forget, we still have the, the after party featuring me at 80s night. That's why I wore a nice bright 80s style shirt. And that's 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Once again, big shout out to Tommy. Thank you so much, man. That was very interesting. I learned a lot. And, you know, that 5-channel big cherry, awesome cherry, what is it called? The King version.
Magnificent cherry.
Magnificent cherry. Yeah, that 5-channel. Once I get a processor, dude, I'd like to check that out because I have another big, THX Ultra 2 amplifier, and your 5-channel is cheaper than that one. Definitely like to check that out. And spec wise, they're on par. So
that's expensive.
Yeah. But yeah, don't forget, guys, and I think some of us will be in the group video chat. I know I will be for a little bit. So attendees, don't forget to go there. And again, thanks a lot, Tommy. And we'll see you guys soon. The journey to the top continues.
Take care, guys. I'm sticking.